Hey all, good evening. Another sunset. Not much time lapse to show you all. However, I think that'll change here in the next few days, and we'll try to get creative here and maybe return to cloud identification and tie in how clouds tie in with isentropic lift and upper air dynamics. So that will be coming up in several days. We just kind of have to wait till these systems start moving this way and the long wave pattern changes. All right, so what else is going on? Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. Still working on the book. It may actually be finished tonight. We're getting very close here, so we'll cross our fingers for that one. For the weather picture, let's head over to our analysis. And it's always good to start with an upper air chart. This is up at 500 millibars. So this gives us kind of an idea of where the short waves are and the long wave pattern. So it looks like we've got kind of a very wavy pattern. You can kind of see this going on here. It looks like the main long wave trough is off the east coast here, and here in the central U.S., looks like we may be underneath a ridge with maybe a little bit of a trough moving through it. At least that's kind of my impression right now. What we do see here is large system coming into the southwestern U.S. Let's go up to 300 millibars, or 250, and we'll check out the jet stream picture. And there's one jet stream segment. That's going to be too far north to be a subtropical jet. So we know that that's a polar jet, and here's another polar jet segment. The subtropical jet, that looks like it is offshore. And we can see some trace of it here with these higher winds at El Paso and Tucson. Another way we can look at it is on the SPC plots, and this is from the rapid refresh model. You can look up there at the top right. So whereas the other chart, this is based mostly on observed data, the SPC chart is based on some model data. So this gives us a little bit better idea of what's happening offshore. So there's where our subtropical jet is. And I think this other segment here, this is probably a piece of the subtropical jet also. So you see that going on right there. And then the main polar front jet is up to the north over New York and Ontario and the Dakotas. There's our ridge there over Texas. And then the main trough coming into Arizona, Utah, and Wyoming there. Dropping down 850, we can get an idea of where the surface systems are. There's 850. Looks like we have a new cold air outbreak coming through Montana into Saskatchewan. So we're going to have that going on there in the northern plains. And then in the western U.S., look at that strong northwest wind there at Las Vegas. And even at Vandenberg, north at 25. We've got a lot of cold air coming in from the northwest. So I think we can safely place a cold front down in Arizona. We've got 6 degrees there at San Diego, contrasting very sharply with that 23 there at Tucson. So 9, that's going to be cold. 4, that's also cold. And then 22 at El Paso, that's very warm. And then we're lacking temperature data at these stations here because the elevations on those are so high. So I think we're looking at the 850 front, kind of like that right there. And then connecting up with this other system in the northern plains. So possibly a cyclone there over Colorado and Wyoming. So that'll be moving out onto the plains over the next day or two. Probably, actually, the next day. And I'm going to expect to see some lee side troughing there with the flow picking up there in Colorado and New Mexico. Okay, here's the meteocenter.com surface analysis. The U.S. is way down here, and then Canada is way up north, and it looks like we have a very strong low pressure system there in Manitoba. So this looks to be our preliminary glance there at the surface systems. And I suspect what we may have up in Canada, that may be a occluded system. And then the warm front, I think that's going to be somewhere in Wisconsin or around Minnesota, like that right there. And you can see the temperatures in Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri running about 15 to 18 Celsius, contrasting very sharply with -10 to -12 in Ontario. So things are pretty cut and dry here. High pressure over the eastern U.S., and in between that and these lows here, we've got southerly flow and the Gulf starting to open up. So let's take a look at the Gulf Coast there. Dew points in that area still kind of dry in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And you can see the readings here, 2, 1, 3. Those are going to be dew points in the 30s. And we can see where the flow is coming up offshore or coming onshore here. Dew points are more like 12 and 13 and even 14. That's going to be dew points in the 50s. So if we do an isodrosotherm analysis, I'm going to do the 10 line just very quickly there. And that's going to look like that. We can do a 12 line. And then maybe a 14. And then maybe an 8. So that 8 line, that goes up pretty far north, all the way up to Iowa. And that comes back in through Tulsa, down to about Dallas. Okay, so this gives us an idea of where the moisture is starting to come northward. So concentrated along and just west of the I-35 corridor and up towards Topeka. So that'll probably be on the increase as that system comes out of the Rockies. The only downside is the Gulf of Mexico, still under a lot of easterly flow. So some of the better moisture is going to be way down south, probably in the Gulf of Campeche. Or is that the Bay of Campeche? Anyway, it should be pretty far south in the Caribbean region. Okay, let's see where to go at this point. Let's take a look at the satellite. And I can see that the mic is not muted, so I think we're in good shape for tonight. Let's see what we got going on in chat. We've got Ron Chalfant. They're in Southern California. Glad to see me back. I appreciate it. Yep, I had a good Thanksgiving. Went up to Dallas. And Burl H. is with us, and Fun with Tech. Brian Toomey is mentioning rain approaching South Florida from the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, we can see it down here. Lots of cloud and overcast around the Bahamas, all the way down to Cuba. Kevin McKinney is here, and Sue M. up there in Indiana. David Moore, warm day in the Metroplex today. Ryan's looking for wet weather there in the Miami and Fort Lauderdale area for at least a few days. Audiovisual running good. And we've got Justin Polium here. Okay, so there is our Pineapple Express coming in from the Pacific all the way up across the Rockies. And we can see that that system coming into the Rockies, that looks to be a fairly dry system. We don't have a very deep comet cloud. So we'll check out the water vapor. And this is looking at it from the Goes West satellite. So we definitely have the moisture out there. It's starting to thin up a little bit here, but we do see, yeah, it looks like a little bit of a comet cloud appearance there in the satellite data. So that's marking where we have that barotropic system moving through the Rockies. And probably the underlying system, the back edge, probably looking something like that. And that forms kind of an S shape. And there's approximately where the surface system is going to be, kind of in this area right there. And if we actually map out where the fronts are, it would suggest maybe something like that right there. However, we do know that the warm front is a little bit further up north. And it's actually kind of extending out up into North Dakota and Manitoba as a warm front. Sorry, I know that was off the top of the screen there. But, wow, there is a lot of moisture there in the Pacific. Huge plume of moisture coming through the Hawaiian Islands, and I'm probably going to check out the skew-tees and see what that looks like. So let me head over and check that out. And that's the sound of the heater coming on. Okay, where's the skew-tees? There it is. Okay. 28.0Z. And looks like we have a choice of Lihu or Hilo. So I'll bring up the big island there, and there's our sounding. And it definitely looks moist there, and it's dry adiabatic. It's following the dry adiabats like that right there. So it looks kind of on the wet side. We can see the trade winds there, kind of an easterly flow, and aloft, showing some westerlies there with 60 knots up in the upper atmosphere. And let me go up to the other island further northwest. And it looks like a little bit of mid-level dry air. Okay, so that's where a lot of our moisture into the U.S. is coming from. That tends to be a very significant source during the cold season. Okay, we will check out the thickness. And we can see things are definitely very active there in the Rockies, showing a very strong thermal gradient all the way from Manitoba down to Arizona. So that kind of backs up the idea of a cold front going through the Dakotas, as well as that frontal placement through Arizona towards the Yuma area. So there it is, front coming into that area. And then the warm front, I'm going to have to go with that right there. You can see the difference in the alignment of the isobars. Very well defined there. So we can kind of use that as a starting point. And it falls right in that trough there. And of course, what we saw in the surface data, that goes for that placement there also. And then we can see out in the Gulf, not a whole lot of isobars extending off the coast. So we don't have a very good flow developed from the Gulf of Mexico northward. In fact, you can see it's kind of under ridging all the way down into the Rockies, or down into the Gulf of Mexico. So the Gulf is kind of under high pressure still. The main gradient is still inland in northwest Mexico, so it's going to take a while for that to develop and start pulling moisture northward. It may be another day or two. So we're going to start looking for that to develop, and moisture should start coming northward maybe tomorrow there. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to go to the mesoscale maps, and we'll take a look at that system moving through Arizona and New Mexico. Okay, so there's our southwestern U.S. sector. And then starting out right now, there's the current map, 0Z. And you can see that strong northwest flow coming through the Mojave Desert. So 15 to 20 knots there. That's the cold air coming southward. And I may be looking at a placement for the front, kind of like that. And you can see offshore there in the Los Angeles area. LA is located about right there. You can see that strong northwest wind, 25 knots offshore. So let's see what happens in Arizona here. You can see the northwest winds there in the Las Vegas area. Okay, so overnight, running forward, and the winds die down a little bit, but we can still see north winds about 20 knots there. In fact, it looks like Area 51 there with the strongest winds, about 20 knots affecting that region. And then by daybreak, looking like that. So the freeze line creeping southward into the Indian Springs area and around Caliente, but not quite to Las Vegas. And then for tomorrow, let's check out what we have for the warm-up. North winds in the Arizona desert. So yeah, the cold front has definitely arrived in Arizona. So I think we may be looking at something like that. Just kind of a preliminary look. And it could be even further to the east. And one way we can check that, it is kind of difficult to find these fronts using just temperature and wind, but we can take a look at the actual temperature plot. So let me try comparing the 23Z temperature for Phoenix. This is today, and you can see they're showing about 78. Let's compare that to 23Z tomorrow. So 75, a little bit of a cool down there. And let's try the next day. 76, starting to warm up a little bit, so that's probably where the air mass starts moderating there over the Four Corners area. But things are getting active out in the Great Plains. Let's watch that system come out. There's the current map. System coming into western Nebraska there. And looks like it's pretty well defined around the Casper area. So you see there kind of a westerly flow to the south part of Wyoming, and then north of that, very strong north and northeast wind. So that's the current map right there, and let's check out what happens overnight. Looks like that cold front pushes southward into the Fort Collins area around close to midnight, and then pushing through Denver, and then through the Russell and Omaha area later tonight. And then it'll move quickly southward. And then by lunchtime, 19Z, that's going to find the front from Kansas City through Wichita, all the way down to Woodward and down to Lubbock. So that's pretty much off the chart there. Cold air coming southward, and lots of cold air overnight. Looks like the freezing line all the way to about maybe Salina, down to Woodward and Amarillo. So let's check out Texas. Okay, there's tomorrow's map. Then during the day, lunchtime, there's that front coming into the Wichita, Woodward, and Lubbock area. Kind of a blue northern coming southward. And then during the day, and then by 6 p.m., we end up with a front from Oklahoma City through Wichita Falls down to Abilene and Midland. If we had just a little more moisture, we could spark thunderstorms in Oklahoma, but I don't think we have the dew points to support that. And this is a good pattern for a dry line also. I would probably expect to find the dry line somewhat like that right there. Anyway, that cold front will be pushing southward, and we get a little bit of cyclogenesis there in Oklahoma. Cold front moves through tomorrow night through the Dallas area all the way to San Antonio. And looks like maybe a bit of an inclusion of that low there in Oklahoma. That's very interesting. So we'll kind of keep tabs on that low and see what that does. But it looks like it's starting to occlude there. If you look at the temperature field, the coloring, it's kind of got this appearance going on here. So that could be kind of like a pocket of warm air starting to kind of detach. And then looks like by Wednesday, it's just kind of fizzling up there in the Branson and Springfield area. So later this week, kind of just looks dry and cool. And let me check out the temperatures. Let's see, tomorrow, Texas, looking at 70s, 60s and 70s there. And then the next day, we're looking at a lot of 50s and 60s. So a very mild push of cold air. This is definitely not Arctic air. Okay, then just a quick look. I guess most of our viewers are in the Midwest. I don't have my Midwest frame up, but let's see. Maybe I have the North Plains. No, we'll just deal with the Northeast sector. Let's try that. Okay, so the Northeast. Cold air, once again. Starting the loop there. Most of the weather systems will be pretty far to the west. Looks very cold there in the higher mountains of New England. And then the southerly flow picks up, and we get kind of a warming trend for Tuesday and Wednesday. There comes some 50s into the Buffalo and Pittsburgh area. And then there comes a push of cold air from the north. And that sweeps in through New England, and kind of a return to cold weather once again for Wednesday. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up and just head into the forecast since it's kind of a quiet day. And I need to get the book finished here. Hopefully I can come on the webcast tomorrow night and tell you things are done. Okay, so there we are, starting out, and let me take a quick look at the chat. Let's see, Tom J is here, and Electric Dog, so glad you made it there. All right, so there comes our two frontal systems, one from the Pacific and another from northwest Canada. So during the day tomorrow, there comes our system driven by this high pressure area in Nebraska, and it's kind of a small high. If you look at the aerial coverage, it's only covering the north and central plains and part of the Rockies, so it's definitely not a very large system at all, and in Alberta and Montana, already a return to downslope flow in that region, so that's going to kind of curtail a lot of the cold air development. So yeah, actually it looks like the GFS going for a little bit of convective weather around the Tulsa area. That looks to be overnight, I think. Yeah, that pops up around 3 to 6 tomorrow night. So we'll check that out tomorrow night and maybe work up a convective weather forecast for Oklahoma. And anyway, our cold air mass kind of dissipates for Thursday. We just kind of get a very vague stagnating high pressure area across the U.S. there. A little bit of a Alberta clipper coming southward, though. And then pretty quiet on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. A new system coming into the western U.S. there. And that crosses the Rockies on Sunday into Monday. And emerges out into the plains on Monday. So this is around the 4th. So the system looks kind of like that right there. And you see the Gulf is open. Some of the moisture making it all the way up into Nebraska or into Wisconsin and Minnesota. And then the high pressure just kind of pushes southward, possibly enough moisture for some showers and thunderstorms in the Mississippi River region. And then cold air sweeping southward, 540 line coming all the way to the Red River. And I think the GFS has backed off a little bit on that cold air. I could have sworn we saw the 540 line all the way down to San Antonio. But that doesn't surprise me. Got to keep the warm air stuck in the Texas area. However, yeah, it looks like the GFS has got a little bit of a Gulf Coast system coming together for the 11th. That's interesting. It does look like from the thickness lines, you can kind of see this banding of the thickness lines. It does look like we have a southern stream system running from California to Texas. And probably what we have is a wave moving through that flow and helping to get weather going in that warmer Gulf of Mexico water. So there it goes. Crossing over the Gulf into Florida around the 12th. And then across northern Florida like that. So that'll be another thing that we'll be watching. And then we get to the end of the chart sequence. Looks like troughing in the western U.S., ridging in the central U.S. there on the 13th, and more cold weather for the northeast. Okay, so that's about all I got for tonight. Got to get back to work on the book, and fortunately my creativity is in good shape tonight, so we'll hope to get that finished. I thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.